They greet the night with a gentle whisper, inviting the listener to let the world soften around them as the Mediterranean breathes in slow, steady waves. Here, under a sky brushed with faint starlight, the story begins like a tide returning to shores far older than memory. The sea glows with a pale shimmer, and the wind carries the scent of salt, cedar, and distant horizons unseen for thousands of years. They describe these shores not as a place, but as a feeling, a quiet threshold where the ancient world once stirred awake. Long before the sound of cities, long before empires carved their names into stone, the coastline rested in a peaceful rhythm that had existed for millennia. The waves that touch these rocks tonight are the same waves that touched them then, and in their eternal return lies the beginning of an extraordinary journey. As the listener settles deeper into the slow current of sound, they guide the mind gently toward a distant age where the earliest ancestors of the Phoenicians lived humble lives shaped by the sea. The night grows softer as they speak, and the Mediterranean of the past comes into focus as if seen through a veil being slowly lifted. The land was narrow, pressed between mountains and the restless ocean, but life found a way to flourish in small pockets of fertile earth and calm inlets where boats could rest. Villages rose quietly along the coast, simple at first, woven together by family ties, shared harvests, and the rhythms of fishing that marked each changing season. These early communities did not yet know that history would one day call them the Phoenicians. They knew only the tides, the soil, the stars, and the whisper of the wind across their roofs of reeds and clay. The people lived in homes shaped by necessity and care, built with the materials their world generously offered, and arranged to shelter them from winter storms and summer heat. Fires glowed gently inside these homes, illuminating tools crafted from bone and stone and clay pots, hardened in open kilns. Children played near the water, racing along the sand while their parents mended nets or shaped wooden paddles for boats that rarely ventured far from the shore. At night, when the last light faded, the villagers would sit under the open sky, listening to the waves and watching the constellations rise above the mountains in steady procession. The sky became their map long before writing existed, and the stars carried stories long before alphabets took shape. These people were not yet sailors of the open sea, but the sea had already begun whispering to them, calling them to notice how currents moved, how fish gathered, and how winds changed from morning to night. Every detail mattered, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, their relationship with the ocean deepened. They observed how the moon controlled the tides, how storms announced themselves with subtle shifts in air and cloud, and how certain stars aligned with the arrival of specific seasons. This knowledge lived not in books, but in memory, passed quietly from elder to child in voices softened by years of watching the coastline. They remind the listener that this world moved at a gentle pace, shaped by the cycles of nature rather than the demands of kingdoms or commerce. There were no towers, no harbors, no royal fleets gliding across the horizon. There were only small gatherings of people who learned to live with the land, not against it. And yet, inside these quiet communities, something remarkable was forming. Within these early Canaanite settlements, places like the ancient ancestor of Byblos, a transformation was beginning, layer upon layer, as centuries accumulated like sediment beneath their feet. Archaeological layers would one day reveal this long evolution, but in the moment itself, the people simply lived, unaware that they were part of something that would one day change the world. The soil beneath their homes held pottery shards shaped by skilled hands, tools chipped from stone, and early attempts at using metals found in riverbeds and mountainsides. They traded occasionally with neighbors, offering food, woven goods, or crafted objects in exchange for materials they lacked. These exchanges were small, simple, and local, carried across footpaths or short boat trips to nearby settlements. And yet, each exchange planted seeds of curiosity, of connection, of something that would one day bloom into vast networks stretching across the Mediterranean. For now, however, the people remained grounded firmly in their modest coastal life. The mountains rose behind them like protective guardians, offering timber, game, and minerals for those willing to venture into their steep paths. The sea lay before them with equal gifts, though more mysterious and demanding in its temperament. At dawn, thin boats carved from hollowed logs slipped into the calm shallows to gather fish and collect shellfish along the rocks. At dusk, fires crackled on the beaches, and the smell of cooked fish blended with the scent of the ocean breeze drifting inland. It was in this setting that the earliest steps toward a more complex society quietly unfolded. Generations came and went, and with each one, the settlements grew more structured, their houses more refined, and their tools more sophisticated. Clay jars became stronger and more decorative, shaped with increasing precision as potters mastered their craft. Houses expanded from single rooms to collections of spaces designed for cooking, storage, and sleeping. Stone foundations began to appear, stabilizing buildings against shifting earth and winter rains. The community moved with purpose, their daily lives guided by experience, instinct, and a desire for stability in a world governed by natural rhythms. In time, they discovered that certain woods resisted rot better than others, that certain clays fired more evenly, and that some stones split cleaner and sharper when struck the right way. Knowledge layered upon knowledge, each discovery adding to the people's quiet mastery of their environment. The storyteller's voice softens, describing how life along the coast was not only practical but also spiritual. The mountains were alive with meaning, the sea carried souls, and the stars were ancestors watching from above. Songs and stories shaped the evenings, told in tones as gentle as the waves lapping against the shore. These stories would later evolve into myths of gods and heroes, but in these earliest times, they were simply reflections of the natural world's beauty and power. The villagers learned to read the land not as something to conquer, but as something to respect, a relationship that would define their culture for millennia. As centuries passed, these humble fishing villages began to transform, slowly becoming early urban centers with markets, workshops, and communal gathering places. Byblos emerged as one of the first, its evolution seamless and steady, like a tide that rises a little higher each season, without anyone noticing until the shoreline has changed completely. Boats began to improve as well, shaped with more care, sealed with resins, and reinforced with wooden frames. These improvements allowed them to travel farther and carry more goods, though still cautiously, always within sight of the comforting line of the coast. The people learned from every journey how to balance weight, how to steer with greater control, and how to predict storms before they gathered. Trade slowly expanded beyond their immediate neighbors, reaching villages farther down the coast and across the water. Through these small yet meaningful interactions, they encountered new materials, new ideas, and new techniques. Bronze tools arrived from distant lands, traded for local timber, fish, or crafted pottery. In return, the people sent simple goods outward, carried in boats that braved only the gentlest of seas. But each successful voyage expanded their confidence, and each new traveler brought back stories that stirred the imagination of those who listened around evening fires. The storyteller lingers on this image, the crackling fire, the silhouettes of listeners leaning close, the endless ocean murmuring just beyond the dunes. Stories became bridges connecting the known world to the unknown, nudging the people toward curiosity and ambition. In these stories, they heard of lands with endless forests, mountains filled with precious metals, and cities so large that their walls stretched for miles. These tales were not fully understood, but they filled the villagers' minds with wonder and possibility. And slowly, the idea that the sea was not a boundary but a pathway began to take shape. Even then, however, No one could have imagined how profoundly this shift would reshape their destiny. The storyteller's voice flows gently, like a breeze moving across calm waters, as they guide the listener deeper into this evolving ancient world. The people's identity was still forming, shaped not by conquests or kings, but by the repeated acts of building, crafting, and exploring at a human scale. Families expanded, settlements grew, and the coastline became dotted with more homes, more boats, more signs of a society awakening step by step. The listener can almost hear the hammering of early carpenters shaping planks, the grinding of stones used to sharpen tools, and the rhythmic splash of oars cutting into the sea. These sounds form a quiet symphony of creation, a prelude to the great maritime traditions that would one day define the Phoenicians. By this time, centuries had woven themselves into the land like threads in a tapestry, each layer representing new growth, new learning, and new connections. The people had no concept of the word civilization, and yet they were building one all the same. They were guided by practicality rather than grandeur, by necessity rather than ambition, and by patience rather than haste. And it was this patience, this slow, steady accumulation of knowledge and skill that would give them one of the strongest foundations in the ancient Mediterranean world. The narrator speaks softly of the land itself, a place shaped by contrast. Mountains rose abruptly from the earth, their slopes steep and rugged, while the sea lay vast and open, offering both nourishment and danger. Between these extremes, the people carved out a life defined by resilience and adaptability. They built terraces on the mountainsides to grow crops, capturing precious soil and water in carefully arranged fields. They learned which plants could withstand the salty wind, and which animals thrived near the coast. They stored grain in clay jars sealed with resin, preserved fish with salt, and collected rainwater in underground cisterns to survive dry seasons. Everything they did carried the wisdom of generations, decisions refined through centuries of trial and error. This way of life, balanced, observant, patient, became the quiet heartbeat of a culture not yet named, but already distinct. And the sea continued to shape them, gently but persistently, pressing its lessons into their daily routines and long-term choices. Over time, they began to look beyond survival and toward craftsmanship. Pottery became more ornate, even though beauty was never its original purpose. Tools became more refined, their edges sharper, their shapes more efficient. Small shrines appeared, built to honor the forces of nature that governed their lives: the sea, the sky, the mountains, the storms. These were not yet grand temples, but they reflected an emerging spiritual life intertwined with their environment. As the storyteller guides the listener further, they reveal how these early communities eventually gave rise to something far greater. Byblos transformed from a village into a town, then into a center of trade known across the region. Other settlements like Sidon and Tyre would soon follow, each bringing its own strengths to the network forming along the coast. But in this opening chapter, the focus remains on beginnings, the gentle unfolding of a society shaped by wind, water, and time. They remind the listener that even the greatest civilizations start with small moments: a woman shaping clay with careful hands, a fisherman studying the stars reflected in the nighttime waves, a child asking where the horizon ends, a family deciding to build their home closer to the water. These moments are quiet, almost invisible, yet they define the trajectory of entire cultures. And so, as the moonlight glimmers on the sea's surface, the storyteller closes the chapter with a sense of peaceful anticipation. The people who lived along these ancient shores did not know what their future held. They did not know they would one day become master shipbuilders, navigators of uncharted waters, and founders of far-reaching colonies. They did not know they would shape alphabets, influence empires, and leave marks that endured long after their cities fell silent. All they knew was the world immediately around them, the sea before them, the mountains behind them, and the daily work required to keep life moving forward. But the quiet strength in that simplicity would become the foundation of something extraordinary. And as the tide whispers once more against the shore, the storyteller invites the listener to continue drifting deeper into the unfolding tale, ready to follow the people of these early settlements as they take their next steps into the vast unknown. As the story drifts forward from the gentle origins of the early coastal villages, the world begins to shift with a calm and steady breath, revealing the first hints of cities emerging along the ancient Mediterranean shoreline. The people who once lived quietly in scattered settlements have grown in number, skill, and ambition, and their dwellings begin to gather into shapes larger and more purposeful than the simple clusters of old. The land itself seems to draw them together, guiding their hands as they build spaces where families, artisans, and traders can share their lives more closely than ever before. From these slow, natural changes, 3 cities will rise with grace and quiet determination, each shaped by its own rhythm, its own resources, and its own relationship with the sea. They are Byblos, Tyre, and Sidon, names that will one day echo across oceans and centuries, though for now they grow like seedlings nurtured by the sun and wind. The storyteller's voice softens as the scene unfolds, weaving the listener seamlessly from the world of humble ancestors into the dawn of the first true Phoenician city-states. They describe how the transformation did not happen abruptly but unfolded in small steps, each generation adding layers to the landscape as naturally as waves deposit sand along the shore. Stone foundations became more common, wooden beams cut from cedar forests rose higher, and pathways evolved into streets where footsteps echoed gently in the early morning light. The coastline itself changed as harbors deepened, docks grew sturdier, and boats began to anchor in clusters rather than drifting alone. Everything unfolded without haste, moved by the patient rhythm of life that had always guided these people. Among the earliest of these rising cities, one stood out with a presence both ancient and enduring. Byblos, nestled along a curve of the coast, became the beating heart of a region that had not yet learned to dream of empire but had already begun to master the art of connection. Here, the cedar forests of the mountains met the calm embrace of the sea, offering a rare combination of resources that would shape the destiny of the entire region. The people of Byblos understood the value of their land long before others fully realized its potential. They harvested cedar wood not merely as a material, but as a treasure, strong, fragrant, and resistant to decay in a way few other woods could match. Cedar became the city's identity, its lifeblood, its quiet signature carried across the water in the form of beams, planks, and carved objects. The artisans of Byblos handled the wood with care, turning raw trees into pillars for homes, timbers for ships, and cargo sought by distant lands. And among those distant lands, none valued cedar more dearly than the ancient kingdom of Egypt. The storyteller lingers on this connection, the delicate thread stretched across the sea between Byblos and the Nile. Egypt, with its great temples and royal tombs, needed wood for construction, for boats, for coffins of pharaohs, and for ceremonial objects carved with spiritual meaning. Byblos became their trusted partner, sending cedar across the Mediterranean in exchange for gold, linen, and beautifully crafted goods. The relationship flourished, not through conquest or pressure, but through mutual need and quiet understanding. Inscriptions carved into ancient artifacts would one day recall this bond, though the people living it simply knew they were part of a thriving exchange. The storyteller guides the listener through the early streets of Byblos, inviting them to imagine workshops filled with the scent of fresh-cut wood and the murmur of hands shaping material into form. Ships under construction rest on the sand, their curved hulls rising like dreams taking shape beneath the sun. Families gather at markets to trade food, pottery, and textiles, while merchants inspect goods brought in by boats arriving from nearby shores. The city grows not through ambition, but through harmony, each new building rising from the earth as naturally as a tree reaches for the sky. Layer upon layer, Byblos becomes a place of permanence, its presence steady as the tide. Its buildings grow taller, its walls stronger, and its harbor busier with each passing season. The storyteller moves slowly, allowing every detail to settle gently in the listener's mind, painting a portrait of a city that stands as the first great beacon of the Phoenician world. Yet even as Byblos grows, another city begins to rise with a very different spirit, one shaped by water, resilience, and the quiet solitude of an island life. This is Tyre, the city that will one day become the jewel of the Eastern Mediterranean. But for now, it is just beginning to find its place, emerging not on the mainland but on a small island just off the coast. The island's position offers natural protection, making Tyre more resilient than its neighbors. Waves break gently against its rocky shores, and the sea forms a barrier that keeps the city safe from sudden raids or wandering armies. To reach Tyre, one must cross the water, and this alone gives the city a certain mystique even in its earliest days. The storyteller describes how Tyre's foundations were laid with patience and ingenuity, stone by stone, each placed with care to withstand the constant pressure of the sea. Houses rose from the rock, anchored against salt and storm, built with materials transported from the mainland in steady, deliberate journeys. The people of Tyre learned quickly to adapt to their environment. They became skilled shipwrights, capable of constructing vessels that could navigate both coastal waters and open seas with increasing confidence. Fishing became essential, as did trade, for the island could support only limited agriculture. This need for connection turned Tyre outward rather than inward, compelling its inhabitants to engage more deeply with the world beyond their shores. In time, it would become a hub of maritime power, but in these early days, it remained small, resilient, and quietly determined. The storyteller draws attention to the distinctive rhythm of life in Tyre, the sound of waves against the walls, the constant movement of boats, the feeling of isolation balanced by opportunity. Smoke drifts upward from workshops where artisans craft goods for trade, and children race through narrow alleyways that twist around the island's rocky edges. Every sound seems sharper in this environment, every story more intimate, every decision more meaningful. As Tyre grows, the island becomes crowded, prompting the city to expand onto a second nearby island, connected by boats and eventually by constructed pathways. This expansion is slow but symbolic, showing how necessity can inspire creativity even in the most limited spaces. The storyteller's voice becomes almost meditative as they describe the early Tyrians working in harmony with the sea, shaping their lives around tides, currents, and trade winds. Ships glide in and out of the harbor, their sails catching light as naturally as leaves catch sunlight. Fishermen repair nets woven with skill passed down through countless generations, each knot tied with the same quiet intention. And deep within the workshop districts, the processing of murex snails begins to leave its mark. The shells, discarded after their precious dye is extracted, pile into mounds along the city's edges, forming early clues to the industry that will later define Tyre's fame. The storyteller speaks softly of these shells, small, spiral-shaped reminders of the enormous labor needed to produce a single drop of purple dye. Though the industry is not yet fully developed, its roots are here, embedded in the patient work of families who gather the snails and learn to extract their hidden color. Over time, the dye will make Tyre renowned, but in this early chapter, it simply exists as one more thread woven into the fabric of the growing city. From the island's edge, the city gazes across the sea toward its mainland neighbor, Sidon, another settlement quietly expanding into a center of remarkable craft and innovation. The storyteller guides the listener towards Sidon with the same gentle drift that carries waves from one shore to another. Sidon, unlike Tyre, rises on the mainland, its territory more open and its opportunities broader. Here, artisans develop skills that will become legendary across the ancient world. Metal workers shape bronze and copper in workshops filled with the glow of open furnaces, their tools striking rhythmically against anvils as sparks scatter into the warm air. The mastery of metal transforms Sidon into a center of technological excellence, drawing traders from near and far to purchase tools and weapons forged with remarkable expertise. Nearby, other workshops focus on the delicate art of glassmaking, an innovation that Sidon will perfect to a level unmatched by its contemporaries. The storyteller describes these glassmakers as quiet magicians, coaxing melted sand into vessels that capture light in shimmering hues. The process is both scientific and artistic, requiring control of temperature, timing, and delicate movements that shape the molten material before it cools. As the glass glows in shades of orange and white, artisans breathe life into it, forming shapes through practiced motion. Some pieces are simple and practical, while others shimmer with beauty meant for distant markets. In Sidon, these crafts do not exist in isolation. They feed into a growing economy supported by agriculture, fishing, and trade. Farmers bring grapes, olives, and grains to the market, while fishermen return with fresh catches from the sea. Merchants gather to exchange goods, ideas, and stories carried from other coastal settlements and inland regions. The city grows steadily, its streets becoming more organized, its markets more vibrant, and its harbor busier with each passing year. Sidon becomes a crossroads of ideas and people, reflecting a culture open to learning, experimenting, and connecting. The storyteller lingers on the image of a Sidonian evening, the gentle glow of furnaces fading, children playing near the harbor, and traders gathering to reflect on the day's exchanges. Life moves slowly yet steadily, each action contributing to the gradual rise of a city that will soon influence craft traditions across the region. Though Byblos, Tyre, and Sidon grow differently, the storyteller emphasizes that they share the same foundations laid by their ancestors. All three cities rise from the patient evolution of earlier settlements, their growth shaped by environment, trade, and craftsmanship rather than sudden shifts or violent conquest. Byblos grows from its deep connection to cedar and its early bond with Egypt. Tyre rises from the sea, resilient and cunning, learning to thrive on limited land and endless water. Sidon expands through craft, innovation, and the mastery of tools and materials. Each becomes an essential part of a network that will soon define Phoenician identity. It is through these connections, these shared yet distinct qualities, that the cities gain strength. Trade between them becomes more structured, with goods moving along well-traveled routes that link the mountains, the coast, and the islands. As artisans refine their crafts, their works begin to find markets far beyond their local communities. Bronze, glass, and wood travel outward, while foreign goods return, enriching the cities with new materials and inspiration. Their ports grow busier as boats arrive carrying traders from other parts of the Mediterranean, curious about the goods produced in these rising cities. The storyteller allows the listener to imagine the hum of these early ports, the sound of ropes being tied, goods being unloaded, and conversations drifting through the air like a soft, continuous melody. Fishermen, farmers, merchants, and artisans mingle naturally, each contributing to the life of the city in their own way. The cities become vibrant yet serene, anchored by the same values that shaped their humble beginnings. Their growth is patient, intentional, and deeply rooted in tradition. Each generation adds to the city's architecture, building upon the foundations laid by those before them. Walls are strengthened, temples rise, and workshops expand as demand for goods increases. Yet despite this progress, The cities never lose their connection to the land and sea that nurtured them. In Byblos, woodcutters still journey into the mountain forests each morning, returning with cedar beams carried by teams of oxen. In Tyre, fishermen continue to set out before dawn, their boats slicing through calm waters toward familiar fishing grounds. In Sidon, artisans greet each sunrise by igniting their furnaces, ready to shape metal and glass with the same dedication as their ancestors. The storyteller highlights the beauty of this continuity, reminding the listener that growth does not always require change in identity. For these cities, evolution means deepening their existing strengths rather than abandoning them. This slow, steady unfolding mirrors the rhythm of nature itself, a pattern of growth that feels organic, inevitable, and enduring. As decades turn into centuries, the cities become centers of culture, trade, and craftsmanship. They establish rules, agreements, and traditions that guide interactions among families, artisans, and leaders. Though each city maintains its own identity, they begin to recognize themselves as part of something larger, a cultural sphere connected by shared language, shared myths, and shared seas. This awareness does not come suddenly, but grows over time as trade expands and networks strengthen. Byblos, Tyre, and Sidon become anchor points along a coastline that will soon be known for its maritime prowess and commercial openness. The storyteller's voice remains soft, encouraging the listener to feel the calm yet purposeful energy of this chapter in history. Buildings expand upward, docks lengthen, and the first signs of city planning emerge: streets aligned with natural contours, storage areas organized near harbors, and workshops grouped by craft. Cultural practices also evolve. Rituals gain complexity, shaped by the influence of neighboring regions and the internal growth of each city. Communities gather for festivals, ceremonies, and communal events that reinforce their bonds and celebrate their achievements. Music, dance, and storytelling flourish as expressions of identity. The storyteller notes how these celebrations bring warmth to city nights, filling the air with gentle rhythms that drift across the water. This cultural blossoming becomes as important as economic growth, giving each city a spiritual core that guides its people. Yet the cities remain humble in their ambitions, content to build, create, and trade without seeking domination or conflict. Their strength lies in cooperation, skill, and resilience, qualities nurtured by centuries of living in harmony with the sea. The storyteller draws the listener's attention once more to the coastline, where these cities stand like lanterns, illuminating the path between past and future. Byblos glows with the golden warmth of cedar, its presence steady and ancient. Tyre shimmers with the silver-blue reflection of the sea, its resilience shining through every wave. Sidon sparkles like molten glass, its brilliance shaped by furnace fire and the mastery of human hands. Together, they form the trinity of the early Phoenician world, each contributing its unique strengths to the shared tapestry of the region. Their rise is slow, deliberate, and filled with quiet beauty. The storyteller guides the narrative toward a gentle closing, inviting the listener to breathe deeply and settle into the evolving world of these ancient cities. The growth of Byblos, Tyre, and Sidon marks the beginning of something extraordinary, yet the people living within their walls remain unaware of the legacy they are crafting. They work, live, and dream in the same steady rhythm that has always guided them. They do not realize that their cities will one day shape trade routes spanning thousands of miles. They do not realize that their crafts will be admired across civilizations. They do not realize that their names will endure long after empires rise and fall. In this moment, they simply build, create, and connect. And it is from this quiet foundation that the Phoenician cities will rise to greatness, ready to carry their influence across seas that once seemed vast and unknowable. As the chapter gently comes to an end, the storyteller invites the listener to drift onward, deeper into the story of a people whose slow, patient growth will soon transform into remarkable achievements that reshape the Mediterranean world. The story drifts onward from the rising cities of Byblos, Tyre, and Sidon, carrying the listener toward the moment when the sea begins to shape them more deeply than anything found on land. Their houses have grown taller, their markets louder, and their harbors fuller. Yet the greatest change lies not in stone or wood, but in the quiet pull of the horizon. The sea has always been there, murmuring in the background of their lives, a steady companion offering both nourishment and mystery. But now, as these cities mature into centers of craft and trade, the sea begins calling to them with a voice they can no longer ignore. It calls not with storms or waves, but with possibility, an invitation to look beyond the familiar shoreline and imagine what lies in the vastness beyond. The storyteller guides the listener softly, as if walking along a quiet beach at dawn where the tide has just retreated, leaving patterns of foam that disappear almost as soon as they form. They describe how the people of the early Phoenician world begin to feel a subtle restlessness, a sense that the world before them is larger than what they have yet explored. The mountains behind them are steep, rugged, and difficult to cross, but the sea before them is open, smooth, and endlessly connected to places they cannot see. The land provides shelter and resources, but the ocean offers freedom, pathways, and wonder. This contrast stirs something deep within them, an impulse that will carry them farther than they have ever traveled before. The people of Byblos, Tyre, and Sidon do not take to the sea suddenly. Their journey grows in slow, natural stages, as everything in their world does. First, they travel along the coast, always within sight of land, using simple boats that hug the shoreline with cautious familiarity. The sea becomes a road rather than a barrier, a gentle guide that helps them reach neighboring settlements more quickly than any land route could ever allow. At first, these voyages are practical, designed to transport cedar, pottery, fish, and metal goods between nearby towns. But with each journey, they become more confident, more attuned to the sea's patterns, more aware of how much could be discovered if they ventured just a little farther. The storyteller lingers on these early journeys, describing how fishermen and traders begin to notice the changing colors of the water, the direction of prevailing winds, and the subtle clues that predict the weather. They learn how the sea behaves under the moon's soft glow, how it responds to storms, and how deep currents move beneath the surface even when the top layer appears calm. Each voyage brings back new knowledge that was once scattered and uncertain but now begins to form a coherent understanding of maritime life. Their boats evolve too, shaped by necessity and ingenuity. Simple dugout canoes give way to more complex vessels made from cedar planks, joined together in ways that strengthen the hull and allow it to glide more smoothly through waves. The people experiment with shapes, angles, and construction methods, trying to find the perfect balance between speed, stability, and capacity. They sculpt keels that cut through water with greater efficiency, and add interior ribs that reinforce the structure against the pressures of long voyages. The storyteller describes the scent of cedar sap warming in the sun, the echo of hammers tapping steadily, and the rhythm of hands weaving fiber ropes that hold each plank in place. Shipwrights become artists in their own right, their craft blending functionality and beauty in ways that will soon be admired across the ancient world. Sails appear next, crafted from woven fabric and designed to capture the wind with increasing precision. The people begin to understand how to work with the wind rather than against it. They learn when to unfurl sails to let the breeze carry them forward, and when to lower them and rely on oars for greater control. Every aspect of sailing becomes a partnership with the natural world, a constant negotiation between human skill and the shifting moods of the sea. The storyteller's voice drifts gently as they describe how the first Phoenician navigators learned to read the sky with a sailor's eye. They observe how stars rise and set in predictable arcs, how the North Star remains fixed overhead like a guiding beacon, and how constellations mark the passing of seasons. The sky becomes a map, as important as any chart drawn on clay or parchment. By watching the stars, the sailors can determine direction even when clouds hide the horizon or when distant shores lie beyond sight. Nighttime voyages become less frightening as knowledge replaces uncertainty, and the sea transforms from a realm of fear into a realm of understanding. The people begin to trust the sea, and in return the sea offers them new horizons. Voyages extend beyond local routes, reaching towards Cyprus, Crete, and even the distant shores of Anatolia. At first, these journeys feel daring, like stepping into a story whose ending they cannot predict. But each successful voyage builds confidence, and each new connection strengthens the belief that the sea is not a boundary but a bridge. Trade flourishes as merchants bring back copper from Cyprus, pottery from the Aegean, textiles from Anatolia, and stories of lands even farther away. With each arrival, the harbors of Byblos, Tyre, and Sidon grow more crowded, filled with goods that reflect the expanding world they are beginning to navigate with skill. The storyteller invites the listener to imagine these harbors' boats rocking gently in shallow water, merchants calling out prices, children chasing one another between crates filled with exotic goods, and artisans studying foreign objects with curious eyes. The cities hum with life and excitement, but beneath it all lies the same calm rhythm that has always defined their world. No conquest drives them, no empire orders them outward. They are drawn by curiosity, by opportunity, and by the subtle call of the sea that whispers to them each day. As voyages grow longer, the boats become more sophisticated. Larger cargo vessels take shape, built with wider hulls capable of carrying substantial loads without sacrificing speed or stability. Reinforced beams hold the structure firmly against the stress of rough waters, while ropes made from flax or palm fiber keep the planks tightly bound. The sails grow in number and complexity, allowing sailors to adjust their course with greater agility. Rudders are refined, enabling more precise steering in unpredictable winds. The storyteller paints a vivid image of these early ships as living creatures, wooden bodies shaped by human hands, animated by wind and guided by stars. They carry dreams, goods, and ideas across the water, linking the Phoenician cities to a world they had barely imagined 1 or 2 generations earlier. With every journey, the sailors deepen their knowledge. They learn where the currents can be trusted and where they turn treacherous. They discover which winds rise consistently in certain months, helping them plan voyages more effectively. They identify safe harbors along foreign coasts, marking them in memory to guide future expeditions. In time, they create a mental map of the Mediterranean, an internal compass built not from drawn charts, but from lived experience. This intimate knowledge of the sea becomes one of their greatest advantages. It allows them to travel farther and faster than their neighbors, opening new routes that enrich their cities and expand their influence. Yet, despite their growing skill, the people remain humble before the sea. They understand its power and respect its unpredictability. Each voyage begins with a ritual of gratitude, a small offering to the forces that govern wind, tide, and stars. The storyteller describes these rituals softly: an engraved shell placed on a shore, a whispered prayer, a handful of grain scattered on the waves. These gestures reflect not fear, but reverence for the vast and mysterious world that sustains them. The sea becomes both teacher and companion, shaping their culture as deeply as it shapes their economy. Songs arise from sailors' experiences, songs of storms survived, of dolphins guiding ships, of islands discovered unexpectedly in the fog of early morning. These melodies drift through the harbors at night, carried by breezes that roll gently across the water. Children fall asleep, listening to them, and grow up dreaming of voyages they will one day take. And so the sea calls not only the sailors but the entire community. whispering of places just beyond the horizon. The storyteller guides the narrative toward the development of maritime networks that begin to stretch across the Mediterranean like threads of a vast tapestry. The Phoenicians sail westward to Cyprus and Crete, southward toward Egypt, and northward toward Anatolia and beyond. Each new connection enriches the cities, bringing foreign goods and foreign ideas that stimulate craft, culture, and trade. Sidonian metalworkers learn new techniques from Anatolian smiths, improving the quality of weapons and tools. Tyrian shipbuilders refine their designs by studying the vessels of Greek and Cypriot sailors. Byblos merchants discover demand for cedar in regions far beyond the Nile. Knowledge flows in both directions, creating a network of exchange that strengthens relationships rather than dividing them. The Phoenicians become known as excellent sailors long before they become known for anything else. Their ships arrive in distant ports with reliability and grace, earning them trust among traders from many regions. The storyteller lingers on the image of Phoenician ships entering foreign harbors, sleek, cedar-scented vessels guided with practiced skill by crews who read the sea as easily as others read the land. Foreign merchants greet them with anticipation, eager to exchange goods and stories. These encounters build friendships, alliances, and trading partnerships that will endure for generations. And yet, even as they venture farther, the Phoenicians always return home. Their hearts remain tied to the coastline where their cities rise in patient strength. Byblos, with its fragrant cedar, Tyre, with its island resilience, and Sidon, with its glowing workshops. The sea may guide them outward, but home always calls them back. The storyteller reflects gently on how this balance between exploration and rootedness becomes central to the Phoenician identity. They are not conquerors, but connectors. They move outward without leaving their origins behind. They build new relationships without abandoning old ones. Their voyages enrich both themselves and those they encounter, creating a network of shared prosperity rather than domination. This harmonious approach sets them apart from many ancient cultures and becomes one of their most enduring legacies. As time passes, the Phoenician sailors grow even bolder. They begin exploring waters beyond the familiar boundaries of the eastern Mediterranean. They sail toward the distant western lands where the sea opens into vast bays and unfamiliar coastlines. Some reach the shores of North Africa, discovering fertile lands and new trading opportunities. Others venture towards Cyprus and Rhodes, forging connections that deepen the region's web of exchange. The storyteller's voice becomes even more soothing as they describe these journeys, waves rising and falling in slow rhythm, sails catching warm winds, and daylight turning the sea into a shimmering field of silver. Nighttime voyages are guided by the same stars their ancestors once observed from the safety of the shore. Now those stars guide them across open water, a comforting reminder that even in the vastness of the sea, they are never truly alone. The sea becomes so familiar that sailors begin naming its features: currents, winds, islands, and shoals. These names become part of the Phoenician language, carrying meaning that only experienced navigators fully understand. The storyteller dwells on this point, noting how language itself begins to shift as the sea becomes central to their lives. New words arise to describe navigation: winds, stars, and ships. These words are shared from city to city, anchoring a shared maritime identity that binds the Phoenician world together. Trade expands in scale as well as distance. Cargo ships carry larger quantities of goods, from cedar wood and metals to textiles, pottery, wine, and oil. Foreign goods flow into Phoenician markets: gold from Egypt, silver from Anatolia, wine from Greece, and precious stones from the East. Every new product inspires local artisans to experiment, blend styles, and create hybrid works that reflect a growing cosmopolitan culture. The cities become windows to the world, places where local traditions merge with foreign influences to create something uniquely Phoenician. The storyteller draws attention to how this blending enriches their architecture, their music, and their craft. Buildings incorporate styles observed during voyages. Pottery reflects patterns learned from distant artisans. Religious symbols expand to include deities from other regions, adapted into their own beliefs with ease and openness. This cultural flexibility becomes one of their greatest strengths, allowing them to navigate ideological, artistic, and commercial landscapes with the same grace they navigate the sea. Meanwhile, maritime skills continue to improve. Sailors begin using depth-sounding methods to measure underwater terrain. They learn to identify subtle shifts in water temperature and color that indicate submerged reefs or approaching land. They master techniques for anchoring in deep waters using weighted stones. Weather prediction improves, guided by observation of clouds, wind patterns, and air pressure changes. All of this knowledge grows organically, passed down through generations, forming a living legacy that cannot be written in a single book or taught in a single lesson. It is learned through experience, through the countless hours spent at sea, through mistakes survived and successes celebrated. And as this legacy grows, so does the allure of the sea. More young people choose to become sailors, drawn by stories of distant lands and the promise of freedom carried by the wind. Families gather at the shore to watch ships depart, knowing it may be weeks or months before they return. The storyteller lingers on the image of these departures, sails rising slowly, ropes pulled in unison, and the boat gliding smoothly away from the harbor while families wave from the shore. The scene is bittersweet, filled with pride and longing, hope and uncertainty, yet always grounded in the belief that the sea, though vast, will guide their loved ones safely home. This trust, built over generations, becomes the emotional core of Phoenician seafaring. They do not fear the sea, they embrace it. It becomes part of their identity, shaping their values, their crafts, their stories, and their destiny. As the storyteller leads the listener toward the gentle close of the chapter, they reflect on the transformation that has taken place. Only a few generations earlier, these people lived in small, modest villages that rarely ventured beyond their local surroundings. Now, they are becoming masters of maritime travel, skilled navigators who understand the sea with intimate clarity. They have learned to harness wind and current, to read stars and storms, to build ships that carry them safely across great distances. The sea calls their name, and they answer with quiet determination, guided by curiosity, shaped by experience, and strengthened by connection. This chapter marks the moment when the Phoenicians begin to open the world not through conquest but through exploration, connection, and trade. And as the storyteller's voice softens once more, they invite the listener to drift deeper into the unfolding journey, ready to witness how these early voyages will soon expand into vast networks that reshape the ancient Mediterranean. The story drifts gently from the widening horizons of the early voyages into the quiet glow of dawn where the first great cedar ships begin to take shape along the Phoenician coast. The sea has already become their teacher, their guide, and their endless companion. And now it inspires them to build vessels worthy of the journeys their hearts increasingly long to make. In the soft morning light, the harbors of Byblos, Tyre, and Sidon are filled with the scent of cedar resin warming beneath the rising sun. The storyteller leads the listener slowly into this world where wood and water meet, where human hands coax trees into instruments of exploration. Cedar, straight, fragrant, and enduring, has always been the quiet treasure of the mountains behind these cities. But now, as shipwrights refine their craft, cedar becomes more than a resource. It becomes the soul of the vessels that will carry their people across the Mediterranean and beyond. The mountains give generously, offering tall, sturdy trees whose trunks are lifted with reverence and transported down winding paths to the coast. Teams of oxen pull the logs in rhythmic procession, their hooves pressing ancient trails deeper into the earth. Workers follow closely, guiding the descent, whispering instructions, and singing soft work songs that echo through the narrow valleys. When the logs finally reach the shipyards, the entire town feels a subtle shift, as if the arrival of each trunk marks the beginning of another chapter in their shared story. Shipwrights gather around the wood, running their hands across its smooth surface, feeling the promise held within each grain. They do not rush. Every cut, every measurement, every shaping stroke is guided by patience and understanding passed down through generations. The storyteller lingers on the image of these artisans working in the golden light of dawn, their silhouettes bending over cedar beams as dust rises gently around them. With bronze tools sharpened to perfection, they carve away bark, shape planks, and smooth surfaces that will soon meet the sea. Each plank is crafted with precision, fitted carefully into place using joints that lock together like the pieces of a living puzzle. The mortise and tenon technique, known to only the most experienced carpenters, transforms raw wood into strong, flexible bodies capable of embracing the ocean's movements without breaking. Ropes made from woven fibers bind the structure tightly, reinforcing it without restricting the ship's ability to shift and breathe with the waves. The storyteller describes these ropes like veins, carrying strength throughout the vessel's frame. Workers step back often, tilting their heads to examine the lines of the hull, ensuring that it curves gracefully from bow to stern. A well-shaped hull is essential. It must cut through the water like a knife through silk, parting the sea with minimal resistance. The Phoenicians learned to sculpt their ships with a balance that feels almost intuitive, their hands guided by a bond with the sea forged over centuries. In the quiet shipyards, sails are prepared as well. Crafted from finely woven linen, the sails are stretched and folded with care to ensure they will catch even the gentlest of winds. Their pale color glows softly under the morning sun, giving each ship a sense of purity and purpose. When the sails rise for the first time, they resemble wings light, effortless, and ready to embrace the sky. The storyteller invites the listener to imagine the moment when these ships finally take shape. Standing proud on the sand with their cedar frames gleaming, they wait like creatures of both land and sea, eager for the moment they will be set afloat and allowed to fulfill the journey for which they were crafted. When the time comes, the entire community gathers. Children stand near the front, eyes wide with wonder, while elders watch with quiet pride, remembering the early days when their people's vessels were simple and modest. Men push from behind, guiding the ship down wooden rollers that ease its descent toward the water. The sound is gentle yet powerful, the creaking of wood, the rhythmic chanting of workers, the hush of waves welcoming the ship. As the hull meets the sea, buoyancy takes over, lifting the vessel into its natural home. Water embraces the cedar gently, rocking it in a soothing rhythm that feels like a promise of safe passage. The ship floats, steady and assured, its reflection shimmering on the surface, like a dream made real. The storyteller lingers on this moment, the birth of a cedar ship, describing it as one of the most sacred scenes in the early Phoenician world. It marks not only the creation of a vessel but the continuation of a legacy, a reaffirmation of the bond between people and sea. Once afloat, the ship is equipped for its first voyage. Workers carry jars of fresh water, bundles of dried fish, spare ropes, and navigational tools. Bronze anchors are lowered carefully onto the deck, their weight promising stability when needed. Oars are fitted into place, long and polished, ready to guide the ship when the wind fades. Finally, the sail is lifted, catching the soft morning breeze. The ship moves with graceful certainty, gliding away from the shore as naturally as a bird taking flight. The storyteller describes how these cedar vessels soon become familiar sights across the Mediterranean, their sturdy frames recognized and respected in every port they visit. Their strength allows them to travel farther and carry heavier loads than earlier boats ever could. Their streamlined shapes allow them to navigate both open seas and narrow harbors with ease. The sailors who guide them become calm extensions of the vessels themselves, steady, attentive, and deeply attuned to the movements of wind and water. The cedar ships extend the reach of Byblos, Tyre, and Sidon, linking them to lands once thought impossibly distant. Merchants return with copper from Cyprus, silver from Anatolia, and luxuries from Egypt, Greece, and beyond. These goods fill markets back home, inspiring new crafts and new ideas. The storyteller draws attention to how the ships do more than transport cargo. They carry stories, cultures, and knowledge across the sea. Each voyage brings encounters with new peoples, new languages, and new beliefs. The sailors return with tales of mountains covered in snow, islands filled with wild goats, and cities with walls so tall they seem to touch the sky. These stories spark imaginations, weaving themselves into the cultural fabric of Phoenician life. The cedar ships also carry people outward, not just goods inward. Artisans travel to foreign lands to share their skills. Merchants establish trading posts along distant coasts. Families sometimes accompany them, creating settlements that blend Phoenician customs with local traditions. The storyteller emphasizes how this gentle expansion shapes the Mediterranean world, binding its regions together with threads of exchange rather than conquest. Even as they travel farther, the sailors remain grounded in the rhythms of their home. Every voyage begins with the same quiet rituals of preparation and gratitude. Every return is welcomed by families waiting on the shore, watching the horizon for the first glimpse of familiar sails. The cedar ships become symbols of trust, connection, and resilience. In the soft evening light, they rest in harbors like wooden silhouettes against the setting sun. Their masts sway gently, singing a low song with every movement of the wind. The storyteller invites the listener to picture these peaceful scenes: the glow of lanterns on the deck, the sound of waves brushing the hull, the quiet conversations of sailors preparing for another journey. These ships embody the calm strength of the Phoenician people, reflecting their patient craftsmanship and their deep harmony with the sea. In time, the cedar vessels grow in size and complexity. Shipwrights experiment with double decks, reinforced ribs, and new types of sails that allow for greater maneuverability. Cargo holds deepen to accommodate larger shipments, while protective rails are added to keep sailors safe during rough waters. Their designs evolve naturally, shaped by the practical needs of expanding trade networks. Yet even with these innovations, the fundamental character of the cedar ships remains unchanged. They are still built with reverence, guided by tradition, and infused with the quiet spirit of the mountains from which their wood was taken. The storyteller rests momentarily on the symbolic connection between mountain and sea. The cedars grow in high, wind-touched realms, far from the saltwater that will one day surround them. Yet their destiny lies in becoming vessels that travel through worlds they never saw as trees. This transformation from rooted strength to graceful movement mirrors the evolution of the Phoenicians themselves. They began as grounded coastal communities and became voyagers who embraced the horizon with steady hearts. The cedar ships of dawn carry this story forward. They serve as bridges between past and future, between land and sea, between known and unknown. And as the storyteller gently closes the chapter, they leave the listener with the image of a cedar ship gliding across calm waters beneath the first light of morning. Its sail glows softly, its hull gleams with golden resin, and the sea opens before it like a path drawn by the hands of the wind. The ship does not rush. It moves with the quiet confidence of a vessel built with patience, purpose, and timeless harmony. And in its steady motion, the listener can sense the beginning of even greater journeys that await the Phoenician world, journeys that will shape history with the same gentle, enduring touch as the cedar wood itself. The story glides forward from the cedar ships that now roam across the Mediterranean, and the listener is guided gently back toward shore, where another craft, quieter but no less extraordinary, begins to reveal itself. The sea does not only give passage and nourishment, it hides secrets in its depths, secrets that require patience, endurance, and a certain devotion to uncover. Among these secrets, none would shine brighter in history than the color hidden within the small, unassuming murex snail. The storyteller leads the listener slowly along a rocky coastline where waves wash against clusters of shells clinging stubbornly to the stones. These shells, twisting in spirals of pale white and sandy brown, seem ordinary at first glance, no different from any other creatures that dot the tidal pools. But the people of Tyre and Sidon, and later many other Phoenician ports, would soon discover that within these shells lies a treasure capable of enchanting the world. The listener is guided toward the edge of a bustling city, where early morning light glows softly upon clusters of workers moving through narrow streets. The air carries a faint but unmistakable scent, sharp, briny, and strangely metallic. This is the scent of the murex workshops, a place where nature's hidden color is coaxed into existence, with care, precision, and unyielding labor. The storyteller invites the listener to imagine stepping into one of these workshops for the first time, feeling the air thicken with heat from large stone vats simmering near the water's edge. The floors are lined with baskets filled to the brim with murex shells, collected by divers who spend long hours braving jagged rocks and unpredictable waves. Some divers walk into shallow waters wearing thick sandals, carefully prying the shells from the stone with wooden tools. Others dive deeper, holding their breath as they search for clusters hidden in shadowed crevices beneath the surface. These divers know each cut of the rock, each hiding place where the snails cling most densely, for the work is dangerous and demanding, and every successful harvest depends on experience. Once collected, the shells are transported to the workshop by donkey or handcart, the weight of thousands of snails rattling softly like pebbles in a tide. In these baskets lies the beginning of a long, arduous transformation. The storyteller describes the next step with calm, steady detail, allowing the listener to sense the pace and rhythm of the workshop. Workers gather around tables marked by years of stains from the dye-making process. With small hammers or stone tools, they carefully crack each shell to extract the tiny gland hidden deep inside. It is no larger than a grain of barley, barely visible, and yet it holds the essence of the color that will one day adorn kings, queens, and emperors across the ancient world. To produce a single drop of dye, approximately 12,000 murex shells must be harvested. The storyteller speaks this fact with softness, letting its enormity settle slowly over the listener like a gentle wave rolling toward shore. Each shell is a life, and each drop is the result of labor so immense that the color becomes more precious than silver or gold. The extracted fluid is pale, almost colorless at first, giving no hint of the royal magnificence it will become. Workers place it into stone vats where salt water heats slowly over low fires. As the mixture warms, the air fills with a pungent smell that is both overwhelming and unforgettable, a scent that clings to everything, from the worker's skin to the stones of the workshop walls. The storyteller lingers on this smell, not to disturb the listener, but to highlight the dedication required of those who work here. This is not a gentle craft. It is laborious, exhausting, and often unpleasant, yet the workers continue with quiet determination, guided by knowledge passed down across generations. They know that if the mixture is heated too quickly, the color will be ruined, turning brown or dull. If it is left too long, it may darken beyond repair. Each batch must be watched carefully, stirred gently with long wooden paddles, and adjusted as the dye changes from pale cream to green, then to blue, and finally into the deep, radiant purple that the Phoenicians will become famous for. The storyteller guides the listener closer to the bubbling vats, where the fluid thickens slowly into dye. Steam rises in delicate spirals, illuminated by shafts of morning light that filter into the workshop through wooden slats. Workers lean over the vats to check the consistency, their faces calm despite the intensity of the scent. Cloth is lowered into the mixture with careful hands. Wool, linen, or silk, each absorbs the color differently, creating shades that range from pale violet to rich crimson purple depending on the concentration of the dye. The storyteller describes how the fabric darkens slowly, as if drinking the color from the depths of the vat. Once the cloth is fully stained, it is pulled out and hung on long lines stretching between posts outside the workshop. In the sunlight, the fabric glows as droplets slide down its surface, shimmering with hues unseen anywhere else in the ancient world. These drying lines create a breathtaking sight, rows of purple cloth swaying gently in the sea breeze, each piece representing weeks of labor and thousands upon thousands of murex shells. As the cloth dries, its color deepens and stabilizes, becoming more resistant to fading than nearly any other dye available in antiquity. This resilience is part of what makes the color so valuable. It does not wash away or dull in the sun. It endures. Kings and queens pay extraordinary prices to obtain garments dyed in Phoenician purple. High priests wear it in ceremonies. Powerful rulers use it as a symbol of their status, knowing that only the wealthiest and most respected individuals can afford such a treasure. The storyteller leads the listener to the outskirts of the workshop, where mountains of discarded murex shells rise like strange, pale hills against the landscape. These piles grow year after year, towering above the workers like monuments to the labor required for each drop of dye. They crack underfoot with a brittle sound, forming a path that crunches softly with each step. The scent of the dye clings to the shells, carried by the breeze into nearby streets, becoming a distinctive signature of the city. Many visitors who approach Tyre or Sidon from the sea describe noticing the smell long before they see the city walls. The storyteller emphasizes this detail gently, showing how deeply the dye industry shapes the identity of these coastal cities. From afar, the murex hills resemble dunes softly shaped, pale, and shimmering under the Mediterranean sun. But up close, they reveal a world of relentless labor, each shell a story of a diver's risk, a worker's hands, and a craft perfected through centuries. Despite the difficulty and harshness of the work, the murex artisans feel a quiet pride in what they create. Every bolt of purple fabric that leaves their city carries a piece of their identity, their skill, and their devotion. The storyteller guides the listener toward the harbor, where merchants prepare these fabrics for transport. Bundles of purple cloth are wrapped carefully, tied with ropes, and carried to ships waiting to sail toward distant markets. The cedar ships welcome them aboard, their decks soon filled with goods shimmering in shades that command admiration everywhere they appear. From these ships, Phoenician purple travels across the Mediterranean to Egypt, Cyprus, Greece, Anatolia, and beyond. It becomes known as a color of prestige, a symbol of power, and a mark of divine favor. No other people can replicate the dye with such mastery, no matter how hard they try. The recipe is guarded closely, passed only from worker to apprentice, held in whispered instructions and exact gestures rather than written words. The storyteller reflects gently on the secrecy that surrounds the craft. In the cities of Tyre and Sidon, some families devote their entire lives to the dye-making tradition. Children grow up playing near the murex hills. Young apprentices learn to crack shells without damaging the precious gland inside. Masters teach the art of heating and mixing, ensuring that each batch achieves the perfect balance between depth and brilliance. Though the work is demanding, it becomes a way of life, a lineage of skill, pride, and endurance. The storyteller lets the listener imagine the quiet dignity in these workers' faces as they move through their routines, guided by instincts honed across generations. They work before sunrise, when the air is cool and the fires can be controlled more easily. They work through midday heat, shielding their eyes from the glare of the sun reflecting off the stone vats. They work into the evening, stirring and checking the dye with a patience that few outside their craft could ever understand. Their world is shaped not by the color itself, but by the process, the rhythm, the heat, the steady transformation of something small and hidden into something magnificent. The storyteller invites the listener to notice how the murex dye industry also influences the daily life of the city. Markets glow with purple textiles hung from wooden beams. Artisans incorporate the dye into embroidery, jewelry, and ceremonial garments. Temples use the color in tapestries and offerings to deities. Purple becomes not just a luxury, but a symbol woven into the spiritual and cultural fabric of Phoenician society. Yet, even though the dye brings wealth and recognition, the workers remain humble, aware that their craft depends entirely on the sea's generosity. If storms are harsh or tides unpredictable, the harvest dwindles. If divers are injured or fall ill, the pace slows. The sea gives, but it also reminds them of their vulnerability. This delicate balance forms a core part of their worldview, a recognition that beauty often demands sacrifice, and that the most precious things in life are rarely obtained without effort. As the storyteller gently guides the chapter toward its close, they describe the final scene of a quiet evening settling over the city. The murex workshops fall silent as the fires are extinguished and the vats cool in the fading light. The hills of discarded shells glow softly under the warm tones of the sunset. Workers wash their hands in the sea, letting the waves carry away the residue of the day's labor. Children run along the shoreline, weaving between rows of drying cloth that flutter in the breeze like banners of dusk. The sky deepens into violet, mirroring the color that has become the pride of the Phoenician world. And in this gentle harmony, the sea, the sky, the cloth, the shells, the listener can sense the profound connection between people and nature that makes the dye possible. The storyteller offers one final image: a bolt of freshly dyed purple fabric being lifted into a cedar ship at dawn, its surface catching the first rays of light as the vessel prepares to sail. This single piece of cloth represents months of labor, countless shells, and the quiet devotion of those who worked tirelessly to reveal the color hidden within the sea. It is more than a trade good. It is a symbol of human perseverance, creativity, and discipline. And as the ship glides away from the harbor, the purple cloth sways gently, reflecting the endless horizon ahead. An outward journey that mirrors the inward journey of a people who discovered how to transform the sea's smallest creatures into one of the most cherished colors in the ancient world. From the deep purple glow of the murex workshops, the story moves gently inland, carried by the cool breath of dawn into the quiet world of Phoenician craft. The air grows warmer step by step, touched by cedar resin, heated sand, and the metallic whisper of hammers, each scent and sound reflecting the patient artistry that shaped the cities of Byblos and Sidon for centuries. As sunlight spreads across the coastline, it brushes the tall cedar forests behind Byblos with soft golden warmth. In these woods, woodcutters work with deep reverence, knowing each tree carries the memory of hundreds of seasons. They choose each cedar carefully, never in haste, placing their palms on the bark as if listening to the slow pulse of the forest. Axes fall in rhythmic strokes, echoing like a slow heartbeat beneath the canopy. When the trees are cut, the long trunks are guided down the mountain by experienced teams, ropes winding around their shoulders, feet steady on the rocky paths. The fragrance of cedar fills the wind and drifts toward the harbors, a sign to the city that new work is on its way. At the edge of Byblos, carpenters receive the wood with practiced ease. Bronze tools scrape gently across the grain, releasing curls of fragrant shavings that gather around their feet. They shape the cedar into beams for temples, planks for ships, carved boxes, furniture, and decorated panels. The sound of their work is steady and soothing, the rasp of bronze, the tap of mallets, the sigh of wood as it yields. Every piece is crafted with purpose, for cedar bends without breaking and holds its shape for generations. As sunlight slides across polished surfaces, the swirling pattern of the wood glows as if alive. These cedar goods travel across the Mediterranean, valued for their durability, fragrance, and elegant craftsmanship. If Byblos represents the patience of wood, Sidon shines with the brilliance of flame. As dawn brightens, the furnaces of Sidon ignite with a red-gold roar, their light painting the sky in warm colors. For centuries, this city was known for its mastery of fire, glass, and metal skills passed quietly from one generation to the next. Inside the glass workshops, the air trembles with heat. The furnaces must burn for hours before the sand inside melts into glowing liquid. Artisans gather with long metal rods, dipping them into the molten mixture that shimmers like captured sunlight. When they lift the rods, a trembling sphere of liquid glass clings to the end. The glassmaker blows gently into it, expanding the glowing orb with slow, careful breaths. The glass stretches, thins, and cools under their skilled movements, becoming beads, bottles, or vases that reflect light in shimmering tones of blue, green, and clear crystal. Shelves near the windows fill with finished pieces that sparkle softly in the morning sun. What begins as sand, fire, and breath becomes something luminous and delicate. Deeper inside the city, the rhythmic beating of hammers reveals the metalsmiths at work. The air is warm and dense with the scent of heated bronze and smoke. Hammers rise and fall in steady patterns, their sound unlocking the old pulse of the workshop. A furnace glows like the heart of a star, its heat melting bronze into a liquid stream that workers pour into molds of stone or clay. Metal workers communicate without speaking, stepping forward or back in a silent dance shaped by years of learning the metal's temperament, its hardness, softness, and willingness to bend. Steam curls upward each time hot metal touches water, carrying the earthy scent of minerals. From this place come blades, ornaments, tools, and figurines carved with symbols of lions, waves, and stars. Each object tells a quiet story of the city and the hands that shaped it. As the day matures, the workshops of Sidon grow hotter still. But the craftsmen move with the same calm intent. Their hands carry burns and calluses from years of devotion, yet they guide their materials with gentle precision. Through their labor, they transform raw earth into objects of beauty and purpose. From Sidon, the story returns to Byblos once more, where cedar work remains the heartbeat of the city. Carpenters carve intricate designs into furniture and sacred panels, their tools moving with soft steadiness. They create chests with ornate lids, decorative beams for homes, and cedar screens that perfume the air. The quiet environment, the warm smell of wood, and the steady rhythm of carving give the workshops a peaceful atmosphere so different from the crackling firelight of Sidon. Yet both crafts, though opposite in temperament, express the same Phoenician spirit: skill, patience, and harmony between hand and material. Together, glassmaking, metalwork, and cedarcraft form the foundation of Phoenician artistry. Ships leaving their harbors carry these goods to distant lands, spreading the reputation of Sidon and Byblos across the Mediterranean. Markets display their work side by side, glass shimmering like captured dawn, bronze gleaming with carved patterns, and cedar glowing softly beneath the sun. Children marvel at the shapes and colors, merchants discuss quality and price, and travelers bring these goods far beyond the horizon. As evening approaches, the workshops begin to calm. Furnaces dim, hammers grow still, and the scent of smoke loosens into the cool breeze. In Byblos, carpenters sweep the day's shavings from their floors, leaving the lingering scent of cedar like a final blessing. In Sidon, glassmakers rest their rods against the wall, their furnaces pulsing faintly like sleeping embers. Metalworkers cool the last of their pieces and place them on racks to rest through the night. The cities breathe together. Byblos with the strength of wood, Sidon with the glow of fire. As night settles, these places of creation become quiet sanctuaries, holding the warmth of the day within their walls. And through the hands of their artisans, steady, skilled, enduring, the identity of the Phoenician world takes shape. Each crafted object, whether wood, metal, or glass, carries the memory of the land and the sea, and the patient touch of those who shaped it. In this peaceful close, the story leaves the workshops glowing softly beneath the twilight, waiting for another dawn to bring them back to life. From the warm glow of Byblos and Sidon, where cedar, glass, and metal take form beneath patient hands, the story drifts gently toward the harbor, where dawn settles like a soft veil of silver mist. The sea lies quiet, almost motionless, its surface smooth as polished glass, and through this early haze the first silhouettes of Phoenician ships begin to appear. They seem to wait in silence, as if listening for permission from the morning light to rise into motion. Sailors move slowly along the wooden docks, their shapes blurred by fog, their footsteps light, their breaths visible in the cool air. Ropes creak softly, cargo shifts, and faint metallic taps echo from distant corners of the port, forming the opening notes of an ancient maritime rhythm. The cedar hulls of the ships glisten beneath droplets of dew, each one carrying the memory of forests now far behind them. Their sails remain folded like wings at rest, damp and heavy, waiting for wind. Soon, with gentle pushes and quiet coordination, the vessels drift away from shore. Oars dip into water with smooth, practiced movements, breaking the mirror-like sea without disturbing its serenity. Only when they are well past the harbor's mouth do the sailors unfurl the sails, allowing them to fill with the soft morning breeze. This moment, silent, ritualistic, older than memory, marks the beginning of journeys that will stretch across the known world. As the fog thins, the ships begin to reveal their destinations. Some glide northeast towards Cyprus, where copper mines shimmer under the rising sun. The Phoenicians have visited Cyprus for generations, carrying cedar wood, purple cloth, and glass beads in exchange for the island's rich copper. From the decks of the ships, travelers can smell pine smoke drifting from hillside villages and see miners moving across the reddish slopes. Copper from Cyprus will later return to Sidon's furnaces, glowing like molten sunlight. Other ships turn south toward Egypt, following warm currents along the coast. The Nile Delta appears like a green fan spreading gently into the sea, its fields alive with movement, and its river carrying timeless stories. Phoenician sailors guide their vessels through busy Egyptian ports, where merchants gather with grain, papyrus, gold, and fragrant oils. Egyptian builders value the cedar beams the Phoenicians bring, using them to support sailing vessels and temple roofs. The goods exchanged here carry memories across cultures: Egyptian linen returning north, Levantine glass traveling south, stories moving in all directions. Farther west, ships approach the scattered islands of the Aegean. They glide past Crete, where ancient palaces rise like dreams from another age, and continue to Greek shores where markets overflow with pottery, olives, and bronze. Phoenician traders walk through these bustling places with calm curiosity, studying designs, colors, and craftsmanship that will one day influence their own work. Their presence is welcomed, for they are known not as conquerors but as navigators, connectors, and bringers of distant wonders. Yet the roots do not end here. The Phoenicians push beyond familiar waters, guided by wind, instinct, and the wisdom of generations. They round rocky capes, cross open seas, and sail toward the western edges of the Mediterranean. Some reach the coast of North Africa, where early settlements and trading posts form the quiet foundations of what will one day become Carthage. These small communities, nestled along gentle bays or rocky coves, exchange purple cloth, beads, and tools with local peoples. The sailors listen to the wind, study the tides, and map every curve of coastline in the survey of their minds. From these outposts, the boldest among them sail farther still, toward the place the Greeks will call the Pillars of Heracles, the narrow strait where two continents almost touch. Beyond this threshold lies the Atlantic, vast and mysterious, its waters colder and deeper, its moods shifting with unpredictable force. Yet the Phoenicians do not fear it. They trust their cedar ships, their stars, and their experience. They follow the Iberian coast, where hills hide mines rich in silver. Here they trade glass, tools, and fabrics for ore that glitters like frost under the sun. The silver will later shine in temples throughout the Mediterranean, carrying the story of these long voyages. Moving northward, the sea grows cooler and the winds sharper. The coastline transforms into cliffs and rolling green fields as the sailors reach Cornwall. Here lies tin, precious and rare, hidden beneath the earth and essential for creating bronze, the metal that shaped weapons, tools, and artistry across the ancient world. The Phoenicians load heavy ingots onto their ships, working in the biting coastal wind, unaware that centuries later, legends will claim they were the first to bring tin to distant shores. Still farther north, their roots extend toward the misty forests and cold waters of the Baltic. From there they obtain amber, translucent gold, warm to the touch and treasured by cultures across the Mediterranean. Most people who wear amber ornaments never know how far the stones traveled, nor that Phoenician sailors braved unknown seas to bring them south. In truth, the ships of the Phoenicians do more than carry goods. They carry ideas, techniques, beliefs, languages, stories whispered in markets, shared beside fires, exchanged between strangers who become partners. The Phoenicians link Cyprus to Egypt, Greece to Iberia, North Africa to the Levant, the warm Mediterranean to the cold northern seas. They stitch the ancient world together not with armies, but with roots, relationships, and trust. Every port becomes a point in a growing web. Every journey strengthens the bonds between distant peoples. Their influence flows quietly, carried not by conquest but by movement, constant, patient, and purposeful. They bring papyrus from Egypt to Greek poets, Greek pottery to Levantine homes, Iberian silver to temples, and Levantine glass to markets across the sea. As the chapter draws to its gentle close, the storyteller returns to the image of the fleet sailing through the morning mist. The sun rises higher, turning the sails bright white, drying dew from the cedar hulls. One ship heads east, another south, another west, each bearing gifts of trade, connection, and culture. They move with calm confidence, guided by stars that have watched over them for generations. And as they disappear into the shimmering horizon, the listener feels the truth that defines the Phoenicians. Where the world is divided, they connect it. Where seas seem endless, they navigate them. Where horizons call, they answer softly, weaving the ancient world together one voyage at a time. From the far-stretching sea routes that connect horizon to horizon, the story returns softly to the calm harbors of Phoenicia, the places where ships end their long voyages and where diplomacy begins. Here, the world slows. The noise of the sea fades into gentle waves, and the weight of empires is met not with armies, but with conversation. In this quiet setting, the Phoenicians practiced the art that sustained them longer than any weapon could, the art of negotiation. Their world is a narrow strip of land caught between mountains and sea, positioned beside great empires whose ambitions could easily crush a smaller people. Yet the Phoenicians do not lean on fortresses or vast armies. They survive and flourish through relationships, through trust, through the understanding that connection is more powerful than conquest. Diplomacy for them is not merely strategy, it is a way of living, shaped by centuries of navigating between giants. When Phoenician envoys travel to Egypt, they go not in fear, but in calm intention. They bring gifts carved from cedar, cloth dyed in deep purple, glass vessels glowing like captured sunlight, and ornaments shaped by skilled hands. These gifts speak for them. In the courts of the Nile, pharaohs recognize their beauty and the craftsmanship behind them, welcoming the envoys as valued guests rather than supplicants. Egypt knows it needs what Phoenicia offers: timber for boats and temples, access to maritime routes, and steady trade networks stretching farther than Egypt's own reach. Thus, diplomacy unfolds like a slow, thoughtful dance. Respectful gestures, measured words, and agreements built on clear mutual benefit. There is no domination, only exchanged promises: cedar in return for gold, cloth for linen, safe passage for steady partnership. From Egypt, the story guides the listener eastward to Mesopotamia, where empires rise with walls high enough to touch the sky. Assyria stands stern and formidable, its armies feared across the region. Yet, even in the presence of such power, the Phoenicians choose negotiation over resistance. When Assyrian officials demand tribute, the Phoenicians give it carefully, not as submission, but as a calculated exchange. To Assyria, tribute means dominance. To the Phoenicians, it means stability, a small price to keep ships moving and cities untouched. They offer silver, woven cloth, carved ivory, and fine goods. Knowing these gestures buy years of peace and freedom, Assyrian kings accept the offerings, never fully understanding that their subjects remain quietly independent in spirit, their cities governed by their own councils, their trade routes still firmly in their hands. The storyteller allows this truth to settle lightly. The Phoenicians give only what they must, preserving their identity while appearing compliant. They master the delicate art of bending without breaking. In Babylon, the pattern takes another shape. The Babylonian rulers value Phoenician trade networks, which link the Fertile Crescent to the Western Sea. Caravans alone cannot reach the ports of distant lands, but Phoenician ships can and do. Thus, Babylon does not impose harsh demands. It offers protection, privileges, and exemptions in exchange for steady commerce. Gifts are exchanged, but always with an undercurrent of equal partnership. The Phoenicians bow slightly, never deeply, and the Babylonian courts accept this with calm acknowledgement. It is a relationship that works because each side understands the other's value. Diplomacy for the Phoenicians requires awareness, intuition, and sensitivity to human nature. Their envoys learn to read the smallest shifts in tone, the quiet glance of a guard, the changing mood of a council hall. They listen more than they speak. When they speak, they offer solutions rather than demands, understanding that peace grows best in soil tended with patience. Because of this, they become the invisible thread connecting rival empires. Assyria might distrust Egypt, Babylon might claim dominance, desert tribes might war among themselves, but all of them trust the Phoenicians. They trust their merchants, their ships, their agreements. In an ancient world fragmented by conflict, the Phoenicians provide something rare: continuity. Their diplomacy extends beyond the halls of kings into everyday life. Harbor masters welcome foreign sailors with calm hospitality. Merchants learn multiple languages to ease trade. Artisans craft objects specifically as diplomatic gifts, small tokens that carry messages of friendship. Children grow up hearing stories of envoys who traveled far, not to fight, but to build bridges across cultures. This culture becomes ingrained in their identity. They remain small in land, but immense in influence. They shape the Mediterranean not by conquering shorelines, but by weaving them together. Their alliances shift as needed, their tribute offered only when practical, their partnerships chosen carefully. Adaptation becomes a philosophy, flexibility, a strength. Empires rise and fall around them, but the Phoenician cities endure. Byblos, Sidon, Tyre, quiet, steady lights along the coast. Their diplomacy outlives armies, their trade routes outlast kings. As the chapter softens toward its end, the scene returns once more to a quiet harbor at dusk. An envoy boards a cedar ship, carrying scrolls, gifts, and the confidence of one who knows that words, when spoken with sincerity, can redirect the fate of nations. The sky glows a soft shade of violet, reminiscent of murex dye drying in Sidon's workshops. Waves lap gently against the hull, echoing the calm heartbeat of diplomacy itself. The ship drifts slowly from the dock, guided by wind and intention, carrying its mission into the vast web of connections stretching across the sea. And in this peaceful departure, the listener feels the essence of Phoenician diplomacy: quiet strength, steady patience, the belief that harmony is worth protecting, and the understanding that sometimes the greatest power is the one that simply keeps the world connected. From the calm departure of envoys whose voices shaped the fate of kings, the story turns inward, away from the courts of foreign rulers, away from the negotiations that stretched across continents, and back toward the heart of the Phoenician cities themselves. Here, after the long journeys of diplomacy and trade, a quieter world opens at dusk, one shaped not by agreements or tribute, but by belief, ritual, and the soft glow of sacred fire. What diplomacy was to their survival, spirituality was to their inner life, a steady, grounding presence that guided them through the uncertainties of sea, empire, and time. Evening settles slowly over Byblos, Sidon, and Tyre. The narrow streets begin to fill with the scent of resin melting over coals, drifting gently through the air like threads of sweetness woven into the breeze. Families finish their daily work, merchants close their stalls, and sailors returning from distant routes follow familiar paths toward the temples that have guided their people for generations. Where the envoys of Chapter 8 carried words across borders, the priests and worshippers of Chapter 9 carry prayers upward into the open sky. As the listener approaches these sacred spaces with the storyteller, the world seems to grow quieter. Stone columns rise from the earth like ancient trees, their surfaces bearing carved patterns of wings, suns, mountains, and stars, symbols shared by sailors, artisans, and families across the entire coastline. Lanterns flicker along temple walls, painting golden lines that dance across the stone as the first notes of nighttime settle over the city. In this soft glow, the first deity to appear in the story is Baal, lord of storm and sky. But Baal is not told here as a figure of terror or thunder. Instead, his presence resembles the distant murmur of clouds gathering far at sea, soft, steady, patient. His breath carries the winds that fill Phoenician sails, guiding ships safely toward Cyprus, Egypt, Greece, Iberia, and beyond. His temper shapes the seasons that feed the fields and orchards. Inside his sanctuary, burning braziers glow with fragrant wood and precious resins. Priests move with slow grace, pouring oils that release sweet smoke rising toward the open roof. Here, Baal is the guardian of winds, and weather a gentle keeper of harmony between sea and sky. From Baal's quiet temple, the path winds upward toward a terrace overlooking the moonlit sea, leading to the sanctuary of Astarte, goddess of love, fertility, beauty, and the soft mystery of night. Her temple is more delicate than Baal's, adorned with carved lotus petals, bronze doors that reflect the stars, and gardens whose flowers release sweet perfume on the breeze. Inside, worshippers bring woven garlands, polished shells, and small clay figurines as offerings. Astarte's statue glows under lamplight, her expression serene, her hair flowing in stone. Her presence feels like a warm embrace, gentle and protective. Priestesses move in rhythmic steps, pouring perfumed oil onto the ground like drops of light. Soft chanting rises and falls with the ease of waves brushing against the shore, while Baal represents the vast sky and shifting seasons. Astarte embodies human tenderness, families, children, love, and the quiet, inner moments that complete a life. These two temples, one rooted in nature's power, the other in the heart's emotions, mirror the duality of Phoenician existence: strength outward, softness inward. Yet the journey does not end there. Farther across the stone paths of Tyre stands another presence, solemn and enduring Melkart, guardian of renewal, fire, voyage, and the spirit of the seafaring people. His temple overlooks the harbors of Tyre, where cedar ships move in and out like steady breaths of the city, built of heavy stone blocks and etched with lions, waves, and flames. The sanctuary of Melkart holds an eternal fire tended day and night. The flame burns quietly, never loud, never violent, its glow reflected in bronze bowls around the chamber. Sailors visit Melkart's temple before every long voyage. They bring small offerings, coils of rope, carved wooden charms, coins worn smooth from long journeys. They whisper prayers for safe winds and strong ships, for their families waiting on shore, and for the promise of returning home. The flame flickers softly, as though listening, as though acknowledging each hope without demand. Here, fire becomes not a force of destruction but a symbol of steady life, warm, protective, and constant. Across these sacred places, Baal's storm temple, Astarte's moonlit sanctuary, Melkart's beacon of flame, the rituals share a common thread of peace. There is no fear here, no harsh judgment, only gratitude, respect, and a deep sense of connection to the elements: wind, night, and fire. This spirituality mirrors the Phoenician way of life: quiet resilience, thoughtful balance, and harmony rather than domination. The temples are also places of community. On festival days, families gather with baskets of food. Children run through courtyards, their laughter echoing between the stone columns. Musicians play slow melodies on lyres and flutes, their notes drifting into the night like petals on water. Even the animals, doves, cats, and small creatures of the dusk seem to sense the tranquility of these sacred grounds. As the storyteller guides the listener deeper into the evening, the coastline grows darker, but the temples glow like calm islands of light. From Baal's sanctuary rises the fragrance of cedar and burning resin. From Astarte's terrace, the moon reflects softly on polished stone, shimmering like a quiet prayer. From Melkart's temple, the eternal flame burns steady, guiding sailors in spirit even when they are far beyond sight of home. Together, these three deities create a constellation of faith that mirrors the very structure of Phoenician life. Wind to guide their ships, love to guide their families, fire to guide their courage. As the chapter drifts toward its closing, the temples fade into a gentle glow, leaving behind only the warm memory of incense, the steady pulse of sacred fire, and the soft reassurance that the gods watch over the people of the sea. Just as diplomacy shaped their relationships with the outside world, these ancient rituals shaped their inner world: quiet, steady, timeless. From the gentle glow of the temples where incense drifted upward like whispered prayers, the story moves softly into a quieter, more intimate realm. Here, the heartbeat of the Phoenician world is no longer fire, wind, or divine presence, but something far more human: the act of writing. After exploring the gods who watched over storms, journeys, and love, the storyteller leads the listener into the small, lamp-lit rooms where scribes worked deep into the night. These rooms, humble and dimly lit, held a different kind of sacredness: the sacredness of memory, language, and the desire to preserve the world through symbol and sound. Inside one of these rooms sits a scribe, calm and focused, his hands steady as he leans over a smooth wooden board. A strip of parchment lies before him, pale and quiet beneath the glow of an oil lamp. He dips his reed pen into dark ink, then begins to trace shapes, not pictures of animals or gods, not complex symbols meant only for priests or scholars, but simple lines and curves. Each mark holds a sound. Each sound holds a meaning, and together, these marks form the Phoenician alphabet, a system of 22 characters that will one day reshape the world. The storyteller helps the listener feel the quiet revolution hidden in this gentle, deliberate act. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or Mesopotamian cuneiform, dense, layered, demanding years of training, the Phoenician alphabet is clear, light, and accessible. A child can learn it, a merchant can use it, a sailor can carve it into wood before setting off across the sea. This simplicity reflects the Phoenician way of life. Practical, adaptable, designed for connection rather than complexity. In the warm silence of the room, the scribe writes slowly, forming soft patterns that glide across the parchment like footsteps along a familiar shore. The act feels peaceful, almost meditative. In these letters, the Phoenicians find a way to carry ideas farther than any ship could sail. From this intimate scene, the storyteller guides the listener outward to the bustling harbors and markets where the alphabet becomes intertwined with daily life. Traders mark crates, pottery shards, and wooden tags with quick strokes. Sailors carve letters onto beams, naming ships or recording destinations. Envoys carry scrolls to foreign courts, messages written more clearly, more quickly, and more reliably than ever before. The alphabet spreads not through conquest, but through contact, port to port, hand to hand, like a melody hummed gently until everyone recognizes the tune. In Cyprus, artisans see the elegance of the characters and begin to adapt them. In the Aegean, Greek traders encounter carved signs and inked scrolls from Tyre and Sidon. At first, they study these shapes with curiosity. Then, slowly, they borrow and modify them, giving the letters new life in their own language. The Greeks add vowels, refine the forms, and weave them into their poems, stories, and philosophies. Thus, without intention or force, the Phoenician alphabet becomes the seed of the Greek alphabet. From Greece, the letters travel westward again. The Etruscans adapt them. Then the Romans transform them into the Latin alphabet, the very system that would one day form the foundation of Italian, French, Spanish, English, and many other languages spoken across the modern world. What begins as 22 simple symbols scratched on parchment becomes the writing system used by billions. The storyteller lets this realization wash over the listener gently, like a wave sliding across sand. Through writing, the Phoenicians did more than record their own world. They gave future generations a doorway to share thoughts across time. Writing becomes a bridge between cultures, a bridge between centuries, a bridge between human minds. The alphabet travels quietly, no trumpets, no monuments, no announcements. It slips into pockets, onto wooden tablets, into scrolls carried by merchants, sailors, and envoys. This unassuming movement mirrors the Phoenicians themselves, who shaped the ancient world not with force but with connection. Just as their ships stitched distant shores together, their alphabet wove ideas into a shared fabric of understanding. The storyteller draws a gentle comparison to earlier chapters. Diplomacy bridged empires, ships bridged coasts, glass and cedar bridged markets, but the alphabet bridges time itself. Returning to the scribe's room, the storyteller invites the listener to imagine him finishing his work for the evening. He blows softly across the fresh ink, allowing it to settle into the parchment like a quiet promise that his thoughts, his marks, will endure. He sets the reed pen aside, stretches his tired fingers, and closes his eyes for a moment of stillness. He cannot know that the shapes he just carved will one day be printed in books, traced by school children, used in laws, poems, songs, journals, and the whispers of lovers. Outside, the night remains calm. The sea, always near, murmurs along the coast. Lantern light flickers on the walls, like the soft breathing of the city. Above, the stars glow steadily, each one a reminder of how small sparks can guide travelers across vast distances. Whether those travelers sail the sea or wander through language and thought, the storyteller's voice softens toward the end, offering the final reflection. Not every great change arrives with thunder or fire. Some begin in silence. Some begin with a scribe alone in lamplight, drawing a single line of ink with steady, patient hands. Some begin with a desire to remember, to connect, to speak across horizons. And so the Phoenician alphabet, simple, clear, humble, becomes one of humanity's quietest yet most powerful gifts. A gift that passes from one civilization to another, from one century to the next, shaping the world long after the Phoenician cities have faded into sand and sea. From the quiet room where a lone scribe had shaped the alphabet that would one day circle the world, the story drifts westward, carried by gentle winds, and by the same instinct for exploration that shaped the Phoenician soul. As the coastline of Tyre begins to fade into dusk, the listener follows the soft pull of the sea into a new chapter, one woven with myth, memory, and the promise of distant shores. This is where the story of Dido Alyssa, Princess of Tyre, begins to move like a quiet flame through history. Her tale is told softly in Mediterranean harbors, whispered by sailors beneath starlit skies, living somewhere between legend and truth. The storyteller invites the listener to sense her presence first, not through grandeur, but through calm resilience, through the quiet strength of a woman who carries grief but refuses to be defined by it. After the death of her beloved husband, and betrayed by the ambitions of her own brother, Alyssa flees Tyre under the shelter of night. She does not flee alone. Loyal companions follow her, trusting her leadership more than any crown that could have been hers. Their ships glide across dark waters, guided by constellations Phoenician sailors have followed for generations. Each wave whispers comfort, each breeze invites them farther from sorrow toward possibility. The storyteller paints this journey as long and gentle, a silence full not of fear but of expectation. Alyssa stands at the prow of her ship, her cloak catching the wind, eyes fixed on the horizon where the world opens into something new. When at last they reach North Africa, the sea softens into a sheltered bay, calm as if welcoming her to the place destiny had chosen. Alyssa and her people step ashore, feeling warm sand beneath their feet, tasting salt and earth in the air. The local inhabitants approach with caution, but curiosity softens their gaze. Alyssa offers gifts, purple cloth, carved cedar, small treasures from her homeland. In return, she is granted a piece of land, defined only by the size of an ox hide. Here, the storyteller lingers on her gentle intelligence, her diplomatic grace. She cuts the ox hide into thin strips and lays them end to end until they encircle a large stretch of ground. Her action is not deception, but cleverness, true to the Phoenician gift of shaping peaceful solutions. This land becomes the foundation of her new home. She names it Carthage Kart Hadasht, the new city. At first, it begins as a humble settlement, wooden homes, small fires, and families who work side by side as though planting the roots of a future they can already feel beneath their feet. But like Tyre and Sidon before it, Carthage grows with steady purpose. Ships continue to arrive from the east, carrying cedar beams to raise new structures. Roads appear like soft lines drawn through sand. Markets hum with early trade. Temples rise to honor the gods who guided them there, Baal, Astarte, Melkart, their names drifting on the warm winds of a new land. The storyteller describes this growth as organic, like a young tree taking root. Its branches stretch toward the sea and sky, toward the unknown and the familiar. But the proudest feature of Carthage soon emerges near the water, its twin harbors. an engineering wonder that blends practicality with quiet beauty. The inner harbor, the Kothon, is circular and protected, built like a calm basin for the city's military fleet. Workshops, docks, and storage rooms line its edges with careful precision. At its center rises an island-like command post, allowing watchers to observe every vessel with serene vigilance. Beyond it lies the outer harbor, larger, open, alive with the bustle of trade. Here, merchant ships from across the Mediterranean glide into port, their sails catching sunlight in soft flashes of white and gold. In this vibrant space, sailors from distant lands arrive with silver, wine, wheat, pottery, and countless other goods. Carthaginian traders send back glass that sparkles like morning ice, textiles woven with care, carved ivory glowing in warm tones, and purple cloth cherished by noble families across the sea. Languages mix like waves at a shoreline. Voices blend into a harmonious murmur, the sound of a city rising without conquest, without force, but through connection. And at the heart of it all stands Alyssa's legacy, not a legacy of war, but of beginnings. The storyteller describes evenings in Carthage, when families gather near the harbor fires to share stories. Children listen wide-eyed, as elders recount how their queen fled Tyre, how she crossed seas guided by the stars, how she founded a new world from sorrow. Some say her spirit still moves through the city like a soft breeze, passing through the Kothon at night, stirring lantern flames as though checking on the home she built. Carthage grows, but never forgets the quiet grace of its founding. The traditions of Tyre live on in its markets, its temples, its workshops, its songs. Ships come and go as they once did in the east, and sailors still read the stars with the same confidence their ancestors carried. The city listens to the wind, honors the gods, remembers the path that brought them here. As night settles over Carthage, the twin harbors glow like two moons resting on the water. The sound of distant waves brushes softly against the docks, and the listener is left with the gentle truth woven into every chapter of the Phoenician story. Wherever the sea invites them, they go. Wherever a new beginning calls, they answer. And from their journeys, new worlds are born quietly, patiently, one harbor at a time. From the soft glow of Carthage's twin harbors still shimmering like moons on the water, the story drifts farther along the gentle curve of the Mediterranean toward the smaller, quieter settlements that form the western heartbeat of the Phoenician world. Here, the empire is not built of stone or force, but of people, coastlines, and the endless rhythm of the sea. These settlements do not rise with grandeur. They live like lanterns scattered across islands, peninsulas, and quiet coves. Yet together they create a web of connection that stretches farther than any army could march. The storyteller first guides the listener southwest toward Cadiz, where the familiar Mediterranean begins to blend with the breath of the Atlantic. The sea becomes wider here, deeper, its winds carrying scents and stories from unknown lands beyond the horizon. Phoenician settlers came to Cadiz not seeking conquest, but opportunity, metal, fish, trade, and the quiet promise of a new beginning. They built simple homes near the sandy dunes, their days shaped by fishing, metal trading, and the slow pulse of the tides. At night, families lie awake listening to the Atlantic waves rolling in perfect rhythm, feeling small beneath the vast sky yet deeply connected to the world beyond sight. Cadiz becomes a gateway, a place where Iberian silver and metals meet Phoenician goods, and where dreams travel in both directions. Its streets hum softly with merchants who understand the language of two seas, the calm Mediterranean and the wilder Atlantic. The storyteller then drifts eastward toward Sicily, the island at the crossroads of the ancient world. Here, the Phoenicians build outposts along quiet bays where ships anchor like sleeping birds. The land is fertile and warm, the breezes soft, the evenings filled with the mingled scent of olive groves and the salty air sweeping from the shoreline. These small communities carve out a rhythm of life, crafting tools, preparing fish, weaving cloth, repairing ships. At dusk, people gather near the water, listening to stories carried by passing sailors. Children drift into sleep to the sound of waves brushing the sand, and the gentle murmur of adults speaking quietly around low fires. These Sicilian settlements remain small, but they are placed with purpose, sitting between east and west, forming a natural center point of the Phoenician web of trade. The storyteller then traces the coast of North Africa, where more small settlements appear like stars across a night sky. Cities and trading posts, Hippo, Utica, Lixus, grow not from conquest but from the simple act of arrival. Families from Tyre, Sidon, and Carthage sail to these shores, seeking opportunity, safety, or the quiet call of the horizon. Their homes are modest, simple stone or wooden structures, smoke rising from small hearths, children playing near the water. Women tend grain, men mend nets, artisans carve ivory or polish glass beads. Evenings are warm and slow, alive with murmured conversation and the soft crackle of fires glowing against the dark. Though these settlements are small individually, together they create a sweeping maritime network, an empire not of armies or walls, but of roots, harbors, and relationships. The storyteller emphasizes that this empire is held together not by force, but by trust, trade, and the shared rhythm of the sea. In Cadiz, the wind carries whispers of the Atlantic. In Sicily, the fields sway under the gentle sun. Along North Africa, golden shores stretch their arms toward the waves, and through all of them, cedar ships glide gracefully, linking each settlement, each family, each harbor into a single tapestry. The storyteller invites the listener to imagine these connections: a merchant in Cadiz trading silver for purple cloth, a Sicilian artisan crafting beads destined for a market in Carthage, a North African hunter bringing ivory to a ship headed east. Each small act, each exchange, strengthens the web that binds these distant shores. These communities feel at once far from the Phoenician homeland yet deeply connected to it. They carry the customs, gods, crafts, and stories of Tyre and Sidon into lands that might otherwise have remained separate, and in doing so, they transform the Western Mediterranean into a space of blended cultures, peaceful, vibrant, and quietly thriving. As the chapter drifts toward its gentle close, the storyteller returns to the simple truth of this maritime empire. It does not rise through conquest, nor does it shout its existence. It grows like a tide, soft, patient, and unstoppable. A network of people who fall asleep to the sound of waves, who trust the horizon, and who let the sea weave their lives into one shared world. In these scattered communities, Cadiz with its Atlantic breath, Sicily with its fertile calm, North Africa with its golden coastline, the Phoenician spirit finds new homes, new shores, new beginnings, and through them, the ancient world becomes more connected, more intertwined, more alive. The storyteller lets the final image settle like a soft wave. Small fires glowing along distant beaches, families listening to the sea, cedar ships resting quietly in sheltered bays. One world, many shores, held together not by force, but by the gentle strength of people who trust the ocean to carry their stories from one harbor to another. From the peaceful nights of far-off colonies where waves whispered softly against quiet shores, the story returns gently to the Phoenician homeland. Here, the sea remains calm, but the horizon holds a new heaviness. Empires are rising, and their shadows begin to stretch slowly toward the Levantine coast. The cities of Byblos, Sidon, and especially Tyre, still glow like lanterns along the shoreline, their harbors busy, their workshops alive. But the world around them has begun to shift, not suddenly, but with the slow, steady pressure of distant footsteps drawing nearer. The first of these powers is Assyria. Its armies move across the land like wind over dry fields, steady, cold, relentless. To the Phoenician cities, These soldiers are not a burst of violence. They are a weight, a reminder that even peaceful shores cannot remain untouched forever. Assyrian envoys begin to appear, carrying demands: silver, cedar wood, purple dye. The Phoenicians meet these demands with calm, choosing survival through wisdom rather than resistance. To them, tribute is not a symbol of defeat, but a pragmatic exchange stability in return for gifts that they can afford to spare. But Tyre, the proud island city, soon becomes the center of imperial focus. The Assyrians, frustrated by Tyre's independence and strategic position, decide to force submission not through diplomacy, but through siege. For 5 years, they stand on the mainland coast, constructing embankments and wooden towers, hoping to starve the city into surrender. Yet, the storyteller paints this siege not as a scene of chaos or bloodshed, but as a slow test of endurance. Tyre's greatest shield is the sea. Ships slip out under cover of night, bringing grain, water, and hope to the people. Inside the walls, life continues almost undisturbed. Fires burn steadily, workshops ring with the sound of tools, markets stay open, and families wake each morning to the same gentle rhythm of the tide. When the siege finally ends, Tyre stands not through strength of walls, but through its bond with the sea and its patient refusal to bend. Time moves forward, and with it comes another power, Babylon, rising under Nebuchadnezzar with golden walls and vast ambition. He, too, sets his eyes on Tyre. What follows is an even longer test, a 13-year siege, one of the longest in ancient history. Again, the storyteller guides the listener gently through the experience. No dramatic battles, no catastrophic destruction, only the slow, heavy passing of years. Once more, the sea becomes Tyre's guardian. Ships weave through the waves, carrying supplies that no army on land can stop. And while Babylon builds siege works with determination, diplomacy quietly threads its way through every year. Negotiations rise and fall like tides. Agreements are discussed, postponed, refined, softened. And when the long siege finally breaks, Tyre remains weathered, yes, but unbroken, its spirit carried across the harbor in the sails of its ships. The storyteller allows the listener to feel the weight of these decades, not as terror, but as weariness, like walking through deep water beneath a heavy sky. The Phoenicians endure not through violence, but through resilience, flexibility, and a kind of wisdom shaped by centuries of navigating both seas and empires. Then, almost like a change in wind direction, a new power rises in the east: Persia. Unlike Assyria or Babylon, Persia grows not only through force, but through structure, diplomacy, and governed stability. When Persian envoys come to Phoenicia, the cities tired from years of siege offer cooperation. The Persians accept without unnecessary harshness. They recognize what the Phoenicians possess: a vast network of ships, sailors, and knowledge of the sea. Under Persian rule, Phoenician fleets become crucial to the empire's navy. In return, the cities are granted a period of peace. Trade routes reopen, harbors grow lively again. The identity of Sidon, Byblos, and Tyre is preserved, protected like a flame cupped gently between careful hands. The storytellers of this chapter emphasize a truth that becomes clearer with every rise and fall of empires. The Phoenicians endure not because they build the tallest walls, but because they raise the widest sails. Not because they conquer, but because they connect. They survive storms not by resisting them, but by knowing how to bend with the wind without breaking. Under Persia, the cities breathe once more. The workshops glow with firelight, markets hum with voices, and ships glide out again toward Cyprus, Egypt, Greece, and the far western settlements. The Phoenicians remain themselves adaptable, calm, and quietly influential. And as the storyteller brings the chapter to its gentle close, the listener is reminded that even through centuries of pressure, Assyrian, Babylonian, Persian, the Phoenician story does not crack, it flows. It shifts. It survives. Through every empire, every alliance, every long night of uncertainty, one constant remains. The endless rhythm of the sea, carrying their ships forward, carrying their legacy across horizons, carrying their spirit beyond the reach of any siege. This is why the Phoenicians endure. Their strength is not in force, but in connection. Not in conquest, but in the timeless, patient art of navigating the world and its storms. From the long, slow years of Assyrian and Babylonian pressure, the story drifts into a new dawn, one marked by the rising presence of a young Macedonian king whose name will echo across continents. Alexander. The Phoenician cities, weathered by centuries of storms both political and natural, meet this changing horizon with their familiar calm. They do not panic, nor do they celebrate. They watch, steady as the tide, sensing that another chapter in the world's great turning has begun. Alexander's armies sweep across the Near East with astonishing speed. Kingdoms collapse. Cities open their gates, and empire after empire folds into his expanding realm. Yet, when he reaches the Phoenician coast, the storyteller guides the listener to notice something gentler in his approach. Alexander does not arrive as a torch-wielding conqueror demanding destruction. He arrives as a strategist, seeking ships, harbors, and allies. He knows that mastery of the sea will be essential for what he envisions. One by one, Phoenician cities along the shoreline step forward with quiet diplomacy, offering cooperation, resources, and support. They choose peace over resistance, valuing stability and continuity, valuing the flow of trade and life. And Alexander accepts their offerings not with arrogance but with a calm assurance, as though this partnership was simply the natural course of things. But then the king reaches Tyre, the proud island city whose walls rise from the sea itself, a place that never feared empires on land, because land could not touch it. The storyteller lingers on the stillness of this moment, the sea resting like a sheet of polished glass, sunlight warming the stone walls, Tyrians watching from high towers with an ancient, quiet pride. Tyre does not reject Alexander, yet it does not open its gates either. With measured courtesy, its leaders explain that no foreign ruler may enter the sacred inner temple during certain rites. Their refusal is soft, respectful, yet firm, rooted not in defiance but in tradition. But Alexander, though calm, does not bend. The storyteller describes the subtle shift in his expression the moment a tide begins to turn beneath an otherwise tranquil sky. He does not rage, he does not threaten. Instead, he decides that the sea itself will bend before him. Alexander orders the construction of a causeway, a massive stone bridge stretching from the mainland to the island. This undertaking is monumental, almost unimaginable, yet it begins humbly, with workers carrying stones, sand, and timber day after day. They wade into the sea, throwing rocks into the water, layering earth over them, building a path, one breath, one handful, one step at a time. The sea at first pushes back, washing away sand, swallowing stones, but inch by inch, the causeway grows. Its progress is not measured in leaps, but in patience, just as Tyre has always survived. Not through sudden victories, but through endurance. The Tyrians respond with the same wisdom that carried them through centuries of threat. They turn to the sea. Their ships slip past blockades under the cover of night, bringing food, water, and hope. Their workshops stay warm with firelight. Their markets murmur with steady voices. Their spirit remains unbroken. The storyteller evokes this quiet resilience, not a desperate struggle, but a calm refusal to yield their identity. Month after month, the siege continues. For Alexander's men, it is a test of determination. For Tyre, it is merely another chapter in a long story of facing powerful empires with dignity. The narrator allows the listener to feel the slow weight of time, the grinding repetition of labor, the distant watchfulness of island defenders, the endless whisper of waves brushing against the unfinished causeway. At last, after 7 long months, the causeway reaches the island's walls. Alexander's forces break through, but Tyre does not fall with a scream. It settles, quiet and dignified, as though acknowledging that no city, no matter how resilient, can remain untouched forever. The storyteller paints the scene with softness, the walls worn down, the people tired yet steady, the causeway gleaming behind them like a monument to perseverance rather than defeat. For Alexander, this victory is a triumph of engineering and patience. For Tyre, it is the closing of a chapter written across centuries of endurance. Even in surrender, the city does not break. It simply shifts into the next phase of its existence, as it has always done. And through it all, the sea continues to whisper along the island's edge, as if carrying memories of every ship ever built in its harbors, every voyage begun under its watch, every trader, sailor, and dreamer who once walked its streets. The storyteller closes the chapter with a gentle reflection. Empires rise and empires fade. Some burn brightly and fall quickly. Others glow softly across time. Tyre is one of those lights, enduring, quiet, shaped not by conquest but by the rhythms of the sea. Its flame may dim, but it does not vanish. It lingers in history like a lantern whose warmth remains long after the fire inside has gone out, guiding memory the way its ships once guided the world across the water. From the quiet shores where Tyre's last light slips gently into the sea of history, the story drifts into a softer realm, one where memory and ocean blend together, where the footsteps of the Phoenicians dissolve slowly into mist, yet never fully disappear. The storyteller's voice becomes almost a whisper now, as if speaking across centuries with the same tender calm that once guided cedar ships across the Mediterranean. Though their names grow faint and their cities have transformed or vanished, the traces of Phoenician hands remain scattered throughout the world, quiet, steady, glowing like embers that refuse to fade. These remnants are not monuments of stone or towering kings, but the subtle, enduring gifts they left to civilization. One of the most enduring gifts is their alphabet, 22 simple characters first shaped under the glow of oil lamps in small workshops of Byblos and Sidon. These letters, created for clarity and ease rather than ceremony, became the foundation of writing systems across continents. They flowed into Greek, transformed into Latin, then into English, and hundreds of languages spoken today. Every time a sentence is written, every time a child learns their first letters, the faint shadow of a Phoenician scribe moves alongside them. The alphabet carries forward the touch of those ancient hands, a quiet reminder of how a simple idea can reshape the world. Another legacy rests in their glass, born from glowing furnaces fed with sand, heat, and breath. The clear, shimmering material that now sits in windows, cups, bowls, and ornaments around the world has its roots in Sidon's workshops. The transparency we take for granted echoes the patient labor of artisans who once shaped molten glass into beads and vessels that captured the sun in soft, translucent colors. Every glint of glass in modern life is a distant reflection of that ancient artistry. Then there is the purple dye, the coveted hue drawn painstakingly from the murex snail. What was once a luxury reserved for kings and queens now appears quietly in fabrics, patterns, and art. Even today, the color carries with it the whisper of Sidon's early mornings, when workers stirred vats of dye and hung cloth to dry beneath Mediterranean sun. It is a color born from patience, endurance, and mastery, traits that mirror the spirit of the people who created it. The legacy also lives in the cedar ships of Byblos, Tyre, and Carthage, vessels long lost to the sea and earth, but whose spirit lingers in every maritime tradition that followed. These ships stitched together the ancient world, carrying not only goods but ideas, languages, and stories. They were built with hands that read the stars like companions and trusted the water more deeply than the land. Modern maps, ports, and sea routes still rest upon the foundations laid by these early navigators. Beyond goods and tools, the Phoenicians left behind something even greater: the first vast web of human connection. Their trade routes stretched from North Africa to Iberia, from Greece to Egypt, from the Levant to the edge of the Atlantic. They proved that oceans were not barriers, but bridges that distant peoples could exchange goods, beliefs, and friendships across the sea. In a world fractured by rival kingdoms and shifting empires, the Phoenicians quietly tied the ancient world together, thread by thread. Carthage, their great western star, continued that legacy long after Tyre and Sidon had passed their prime. Even after Carthage itself fell, its influence endured through the knowledge, courage, navigation techniques, and cultural practices it carried. Civilizations that rose afterward built upon Carthaginian foundations, whether they realized it or not. The storyteller gently guides the listener to see how these ancient threads now lead quietly into our own world. We speak through their letters, we see through their glass, we navigate with the principles they refined. We trade along global routes, shaped by patterns they once traced along coasts and islands. Though the Phoenicians vanished softly into the empires that absorbed them, their influence moves through history like a lantern carried carefully through the night. Its flame does not flicker loudly, it glows steadily, protected by time, memory, and the countless lives shaped by their innovations. The storyteller invites the listener to feel the peace of this truth. A civilization may dissolve, but its essence can linger, calm as tide water, light as sea foam, enduring as the wind that once filled their sails. Their disappearance resembles morning mist melting into sunlight, vanishing, yes, but leaving behind a clarity, a freshness, a trace that continues long after the haze is gone. In the final moments, the storyteller paints the legacy through gentle images that drift like dreams. Cedar ships gliding across a quiet horizon, purple cloth fluttering in soft breeze, glass glowing under the touch of firelight, scribes shaping letters that ripple outward through centuries. And as the story comes to its final breath, the sea becomes still, the waves soften, the night deepens, lanterns fade into the dark. What remains is the legacy of the Phoenicians, woven into every sound we speak, every object we touch, every journey we take. Their story does not vanish, it becomes part of who we are. And in this gentle ending, the listener is invited to breathe deeply, close their eyes, and rest held by the quiet truth that some civilizations leave behind not ruins, but rhythms, not monuments, but memories, not empires carved in stone, but legacies carried softly in the human heart.